Hey, so now we're in the last part of our lecture, and we already talked about the predictive winners and losers, and I made the point in the previous lecture that, well, one, that just because something is predictive doesn't mean it's causal, but if it's causal, it should be predictive, and so we can eliminate variables that don't seem to predict as potential causal factors. So that's kind of a key point that I want to make, okay? Um, Now, though, I still want to make the case that about the direction of change and how that matters for policy, right? And so the overarching kind of point I want to make in this particular section is that different countries might go into civil conflict for different reasons. And in fact, that's kind of the reason why civil conflict is rare, because everything has to be sort of like a perfect storm in some ways. But when they do go into conflict, just because a variable exists at a certain range, uh, doesn't mean that particular country is going to go into conflict, because the other predictors of other potential causes of conflict might be in different ranges that prevent conflict. And so what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at some of the variables here. So let's go to the next slide. So let's take a look at transparency. That was one of the big ones. So let me see if I can, wait, oops. Let's do this. Okay, so that's how transparency matters. Maybe I should zoom, there you go. Let me zoom back just a little bit. So that's the partial dependence on transparency. So notice that, so first of all, most of the data is sort of scrunched up around here, but nevertheless, we notice something that first of all, as transparency goes up, the amount of conflict goes down, right? So on the vertical axis, we're measuring the likelihood of conflict. And we're measuring transparency on the horizontal axis. So as the amount of conflict goes up, again, as the amount of transparency goes up, the amount of conflict goes down. The likelihood of conflict goes down. So that's kind of a nice general trend. But notice that this going down is not a consistent pattern, right? Now, go back to think about econometrics class. In econometrics, you estimated a point parameter, right? You said, well, y hat equals beta hat 1x, right? So basically, if you figured out, for example, price equals 0.2 quantity, right? You estimated that equation, right? You estimate something like that. And what you say is that, or it should be price equals like 10 minus 0.2 quantity or something. So basically, as quantity goes up, price goes down by 1 unit, quantity goes down by 20% or something, right? The idea, I mean, I use percentage because usually in those kinds of models, it's all done kind of log linearized. So, but see, we could say something similar here. If we did an econometric test, here's what we would find. We'd say that, hey, look, if you look at conflict likelihood, a logit model, then as transparency increases by 1 unit, then the likelihood of conflict goes down, let's say, by 2% or something. But see, that kind of result would be misleading, right? Because it doesn't go down. I mean, on average, it might go down by 2%, but it doesn't go down by 2% for the entire range for which transparency happens. See what I mean? So if you will go back to our kind of model, let's see, for our accuracy numbers, logit is pretty accurate, right? But it doesn't allow us to come up with something that looks like this. And this is important for policymakers, because what this says is that if you increase transparency by a little bit, if a country is kind of over here, you increase transparency by a little bit, that's not going to have any effect on conflict, right? It's only when you increase transparency in that range that you get the biggest drop. But even there, if you increase transparency in this range, that's going to have an effect on conflict. See what I mean? So it depends whether transparency actually has an effect on conflict or not. Well, the answer to that is it depends. And a graph like this gives us a much more nuanced view. And in fact, if you look at the forest method, notice an increase in transparency in this range. Now, overall, that fits the model, right? It goes down, right? But in the forest method, in this range, conflict goes, actually likelihood goes up, right? So the question is, should you look at the forest method or the bagging method? Yeah? Now, and all these methods say conflict and average goes down. Yeah? Forest or bagging? Well, that depends on which number you care about most. If you look at forest, you'll notice that specificity is 0.98, sensitivity is 0.54. While for the bagging method, let's go back here. The bagging method, the specificity is 0.98, but the sensitivity is 0.59, right? So maybe it's slightly better to overall to go in terms of accuracy. You're not losing a whole lot of specificity if you go with bagging, but you're gaining a substantial amount of sensitivity if you go with bagging over forest. And so if that's the case, if you do go with bagging, then maybe you care less, a little bit less about this particular optic. See how I can come up with kind of more nuanced kind of view of how to prevent conflict as a consequence of some of these methodologies. So this is really kind of is part of the thing that makes machine learning quite helpful, right? At the same time, I also want to notice something. Everything's going hunky-dory, then suddenly, whoa! And then everything is, they're all kind of hunky-dory. So what's kind of happening here? It's an equilibrium switch. There's an equilibrium switch. No effect on conflict, no effect on conflict, but in this range, huge effect on conflict, right? So you go from nothing to everything, right? And that's actually one of the things we notice in all our results on average. Where do you have it? What kind of modeling approach allows you to get these sorts of results? Well, those are the game theoretic ones. Remember, we had, in the case of the stagnant, we had two equilibria. Well, guess what? You were either in one equilibrium, nobody deviated from that, or you were in another, nobody deviated from that. There's a good one and a bad one. So once you were there, you were there. But at some point, lack of trust, the sudden lack of trust, and boom, you go from one equilibrium to another. So what this says that if you really want to model civil conflict, then you want to look at these kind of game theoretic kinds of models. Strategic interactions do indeed matter. And our old-fashioned sort of economics, just looking at opportunity costs and the neoclassical stuff that you guys do in intermediate and micro, yeah, that's not very helpful in thinking about civil conflict. So what else do we, in fact, if you look at all of these, you notice that that's sort of similar, right? So you want to notice the equilibrium switches. You want to notice that I don't know why I said not here, that different countries may fall into conflict for different reasons, right? So for example, a country might be over here in transparency, and let's say transparency goes down by a little bit, and that's not going to have an effect on conflict. But the same country might be, let's kind of boost up that a little bit. If you look at credibility, the same country might be sort of over here on credibility, right? And maybe there's been a slight increase in credibility, a local election or something, right? And boom, it goes down. Oh, excuse me. So this is actually the other way around. So credibility, this is credibility kind of, going down. That's the way the numbers are. Sorry, I apologize for that. So basically, here, let's say credibility goes down and the likelihood of conflict goes up, right? So in a country like this, transparency may not be the immediate cause, but credibility is, right? So the point is that different countries might fail for different reasons. I'll be assigning a reading to you all to sort of really highlight that, where we kind of look at we're not looking at civil conflict per se, but we're looking at state failure. And we get similar kinds of results where different countries might fail for different kinds of reasons. So hopefully this was helpful to you all. Let me know if you have any questions. Once again, I'll be looking at the little help discussion board, but you will also have another one of these Zoom meetings that I schedule at between 11:30 and 12. And of course, you can schedule meetings with me at any other time as well. Just kind of don't shoot me an email, set it up on Calendly, and that way, you know, it's there on my calendar, and there's less likelihood that I'm going to forget about it. So good luck, and that's our lecture for this week.